Hello everyone, it's Christopher Ayers, and if you haven't guessed it by now, today we are going to be installing the Mountune Sport lowering springs. Now they only lower the vehicle 15 millimeters, which is approximately 0.59 of an inch, so looking at about a little over half of an inch. I can tell you right now out of the box that these things are almost have a sparkle black powder coat to them. They're very nice looking. Quality is top notch on them as usual from Mountune though. So without further ado, let's get started by starting on the fronts here. So first thing we're going to do is remove each respective Torx, one on this side and one on that side, which are T30s. And then once we get those removed, we're going to remove the two center push pins, which we can remove with either a push pin puller or a small flathead screwdriver. Alright, now that we've gotten the two Torx bits loosened up, we're going to go ahead and pop these retainers out. And that's basically going to separate the bottom piece of this cowl to the strut bolts here. Right now that we've removed the Torx bits and the two pins, we're going to go ahead and remove this weather strip right here, which just slides right out. Set it right here for the time being. You'll see that there's two more push pins we need to pull. And now lastly, we have two 10 millimeter bolts. One right here, which is underneath your little vent there, and one on the other side. And then from there, we can start removing the bottom side of the cowl to bring it out to give us access to those strut bolts. Let's bring this up and set it right there. Now, as you can see, we have access to the two 13 millimeter strut bolts in the front, and we have access to the rear through pulling the compartment out. So we now have access to be able to undo the strut at the top of the strut tower without having to take this whole thing off, which would involve taking the actual wipers off, and that's a real pain in the butt. So I knew those Steeda jack stands I installed would come in play somewhere along the lines. I'm glad I left them on. Right, now that we got the car up in the air, we've got as much room as we can in the front here. We want to get as high as we can because we're going to need that room to knock the knuckle down to get it out of the strut. We can now take the wheel off and start disassembling some of the pieces to the strut, such as the sway bar end link, the ABS module, and the brake line and whatnot. Alright, now that we've got the wheel off, the first thing we're going to do to prevent any damage is actually disconnect the ABS sensor from down in the center of the knuckle. Unsnap it, and then we can just take this and slide it off and put it back here. This is definitely something we do not want to damage. Just tuck it up out of the way. We're going to take the 10 millimeter, loosen up the brake line bolt here. So all the threading is out. And disconnect this from the strut. Basically, we're trying to get everything off of the strut as possible because the strut actually has to come out of the car to seat the springs on. So once we get that out of the way, then we should be able to slide that out of the way. Alright, by using a 15 millimeter, we're going to go ahead and slide that over this bolt here. And then we're going to take a 5 Allen bit, stick that in the center. Just hold on to that and basically loosen it up. And then from there we can just hold on to this and ride it until it comes out. This is an extremely long bolt for some reason. I don't know why Ford chose to go with such a long bolt, but and the other problem is the bolt is actually kind of oval shape, so you can't really hand spin it once you get it loose. You have to kind of take it all the way to the end with the wrench. Now, as you can see, this is a 15 millimeter nut that we're taking off this pinch weld. Mine came off pretty decently easy. You may need a pry bar depending on how much, I guess, what driving conditions you're in and what it looks like back there. So I was able to get mine off with just a 3/8 socket and a 15 millimeter. Also, I did go ahead and spray down this whole area because I do see rust building up with a little bit of WD-40 just to kind of break down the rust, because after getting that out, now this is going to be the hardest part, which is separating the strut from the knuckle. Now, one thing that can help you get this knuckle detached from the strut is by going in with a chisel or some kind of edged object that you can use to separate it, and just going in and basically driving it up through the bottom and putting some separation on there. So once we do that, then we can basically just take to the hitting the top of the knuckle down, and that'll eventually start separating from the strut. And this is probably the most difficult part of doing this whole job. Alright, now once you've got the knuckle down so you're loose from the strut, the next challenge comes with actually getting the strut out of the pocket here, which is going to include some persuasion of basically trying to pull it off to the side and getting it out of the knuckle like that. Don't want to lose that, that's for your ABS, but now we're out of the knuckle. Now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and disconnect your suspension stiffening system, the, I guess, sport and normal mode. And that's right back here behind the cowl. And it's just an easy black clip that you press in and pull the whole clip basically out. So this is basically what you're going to see when you get it out. Yellow, little red grommet, and a little black hose. Now what you want to do is you want to take this and route it and unhook it from all the little clips that it's connected to. Remember how it's routed. You're going to want to make sure that this has proper clearance. Now if you have somebody to help you out, that would be great. If not, just make sure when you're pulling the strut out that this doesn't get caught up on anything. It's not something you want to replace a strut over a broken connection. And basically once we pulled the strut out, this is what we're left with. It's a complete assembled front strut. You got your top plate, your bearing, obviously electronic control for sport and normal mode and race mode and all that good stuff. Your top nut here, which is an 18 millimeter, which I'm going to show you how to get off easily. Right now it looks like it's going to be a challenge, but once I show you it won't be too bad. Alright, now we're going to use our spring compressors here, which basically you can rent from any auto parts store. They require like a $40 deposit, which they keep if you keep the spring tensioners here. But what I've found is that they usually cost more to buy, so just giving them that deposit and not returning it usually works out pretty well for me. Not saying to do that, but I won't say how I got mine, but you could take a guess. As you can see, since we do have a level suspension wire here, we cannot use an impact on this top bolt. So what I have is an 18 millimeter deep box end here. Take that and set it in, and then we're going to try and loosen the bolt by using one of the strut bolts to hold on to the assembly as I loosen it. Taking it off, you're going to have to struggle with this strut bellow here, just by pushing it in side by side as you're coming around. You should be able to loosen it up to where the internal comes off. Now as you can see, sitting the Mountune on the right to the stock to the left, that there isn't really that much sizing difference. Say about a ½ inch. We'll see when we get it all tied up and put in the strut and see what it looks like on the vehicle. But okay, since we've already used the spring compressors to put the new spring on the strut, I have since then ran the ride selection sensor back up through the underneath here and wired that out. And I've also connected the 3 secures on the strut just softly so they stay in place, because what we're going to do now is we're going to have to jack up this bottom portion of the knuckle to seat it all the way into the strut. So that's what we're going to do next, is put a jack right underneath the ball joint and jack it up, and eventually the vehicle should seat itself down. I do advise maybe using a little bit of sandpaper on the inside bore of the strut, maybe on the outside of the strut yourself, and also to put a little WD-40 in there just so it slips in right. So out of all the lowering kits that I've done, including coilovers, this seems to be the worst part about the job. So first you want to just kind of make sure everything's loose here, and then we'll start jacking up. And we see that it's not moving whatsoever. So we'll take a rubber mallet and give it a couple hits. Move the strut around a little bit more. There you go. It's not all the way in yet. Still not all the way. Just keep working it back and forth and it'll slowly fall into place. And you'll know it's into place by looking at the very back. You should see about a quarter, maybe an eighth inch of the strut sticking out the back. Now that we've got it all the way sat, you can feel in the back here that the strut is sticking out how it's supposed to be. So we are going to reattach the pinch bolt back here on the knuckle to make sure that the strut stays in place and doesn't sink when we let it down. We're also going to take advantage of, while we have it up, to put the arm back on here and put the brake line back in, and also do not forget to put your ABS back in, or else you won't be able to get any drive modes or any of that fun stuff, and you won't have ABS. And I also promise that the rear is much easier than the front, especially on these types of cars. Alright guys, now that we've gotten the fronts done and the wheels back on and torqued, we're going to start on the rears, which are much easier to do than the fronts. Not that the fronts are hard, there's just a lot of components to doing the fronts, whereas in the rear, that's all you really have to do is take the wheel off and drop the lower control arm. Alright, once I've gotten all the lug nuts off, we're just going to go ahead and pull the rear wheel off, set it aside. I want to show you guys exactly what we need to do to get this done. As you can see, the spring is right there. And that's really all we need to do, is come down to this lower control arm bolt and disconnect that. Alright, now as you guys can see, I set the jack right underneath the bottom of the coil of the control arm, and I jacked it up about a quarter of an inch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the lower control arm bolt on the very front here, and then let the jack down, and this should come down and we should be able to pull the spring right out. Now what I did was I jacked it up a little bit higher after I got the bolt out, and did that twice, and that's about what it took to get the rubber bushing to come down. So now we can let the spring all the way down, and it's out of the pocket, and as you see, that's how easy it is to remove the rear spring. Now one good idea is, once you get that spring out, go ahead and, if you have compressed air, shoot it in here or wipe this out, because what you don't want is all the gravel rocks making any noise against your new springs. So you can basically just kind of wipe it all to the end. It'll fall out the bottom hole, as you can. Now I'd also recommend doing the same thing for the top perch, although the rocks aren't really going to get in there. But it's worth cleaning it while you have it out anyways, you know. Just going to clean that out, make sure there's nothing in there. Now as you can see in this rear perch, there is an end. So that's basically where you want your coil spring, the top of your coil spring, to end. So we're going to put it in here, right where it's ending, there. And we're going to seat it in, and we are just going to adjust it until the end piece is hitting the end there. See? Just turn it all the way and we're good. And then we're going to do the same thing with the bottom. because as you can see in the bottom, there is also a small hole right here which signifies the end. So when we put the new spring in, we're going to make sure that we put the spring in all the way until that bottom spring meets the end. Right there it does. And then we can kind of line things back up, put it back into place, and now we can put the jack back underneath here and tighten it up. Now an important thing to mention, which some of you may know, some of you might not, is when you take a wheel off a car, you never just want to tighten the lugs hand tight and set the car down and then torque it. You always want to take the car and bring it down until the wheel just touches the ground. Now as you can see, it's obviously it's not lowered, but the wheel's not going to move. So then you want to go ahead, set your torque wrench to 125 Newton meters and go in a star pattern. So all in all, I don't think that that was that difficult of an install. The parts that came were definitely high quality, perfect fit. Other than that, I mean, the probably front end went down about a ½ inch. The rear went down probably about a ½ inch also. They say 15 millimeters, so maybe a little over a ½ inch, but either way, there's still plenty of clearance. They still fit on race ramps, which means that the car's still taller than a Corvette. So if you guys liked the video, definitely give me a thumbs up. If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely leave them below. I'm usually good about answering those. And make sure you subscribe for more future content. Thanks for spending the day with me, guys. Have a good one.